Mr. Madam Speaker, what side opposition and side proposition wishes to achieve in this debate is basically the same. We want a more equal society. This means that the metric in order to judge this debate is also very crystal clear. It is simply who makes a better, fairer society in terms of two things. Number one, on equality in terms of opportunity. Number two, on a society that is more equal in terms of wealth distribution. So what I'm going to do in my speech is I'm going to use these two metrics to show you why side proposition should take this debate, and also a modest comparison of the roles that side proposition and side opposition is going to have at the end of the day. So two questions about this debate. Number one, is this justified? And number two, who maximizes utility and distributes wealth on a better scale? But before we go on to our clashes, let's first talk about the model and the alternative that side opposition wishes to give us. They say that they're going to limit the amount of spending. They're going to limit the amount of money that actually goes into these candidate campaigns or whatnot. We see that this is hugely detrimental to their case in mainly three ways. Number one, the fact that you're limiting the amount of campaign funds is simply very detrimental to democracy. The reason why you want money in democracy itself is because more money means more advertisements, it means more newspapers, it means more articles, it means a greater exposure to the public in general about what policies that a candidate is trying to put forward, about what is the direction that this party is trying to achieve in our society or whatnot. From the moment that you limit the amount of budget spending for these candidates is the moment in which you actually decrease the capacity for the candidates to have those advertisements or have a greater exposure to our society. But note the fact that from the moment when candidates can use only a limited amount of budget, you want to make the most of it. That means you're going to use that money in order to advertise yourself in the districts that are going to have high voting rates. What are the areas that have high voting rates? We believe that those areas are mostly the rich districts in our society. The districts where those people do not have concerns about what they're going to eat tomorrow, about will they have a roof over their head or whatnot. Therefore, we believe that under their side, they actually detriment democracy and harm inclusivity as a whole, because they actually benefit the rich, because they have a democracy that's only open to the rich. But number two, even though we assume that this doesn't happen, you still have a wealth gap under your side. You still have a disparity between presidential candidates as well. So if you want to reduce that disparity, you need to simply limit the amount of budget spending, limit the amount of campaign funds even more. But the problem is, if you limit the amount of campaign spending, you actually increase the problems regarding inclusivity. So your side is actually under a dilemma in which you have to choose between your principle or having a much more inclusive society. But number three, even though we concede to the fact that their alternative is going to be so good, we don't think that there's a mutually exclusive benefit that exists under the world of side opposition. We believe that if limiting the amount of campaign funds is so much beneficial, we're also more than happy to have that under the world of side proposition. So two questions about this debate. Number one, is this justified? Let's talk about the justification of this action. They say that there are people who want the super rich to run for candidates. Therefore, this is a violation on democratic principles. Okay, many reasons why this is simply flawed. Number one, if you're so much concerned about people choosing the people that they want to choose, why do you limit neo-Nazis from running in presidential campaigns in Germany? There is a certain limit in which you can run for presidential campaigns. We concede to the fact that democracy is all about inclusivity, but we believe that there's a certain limit to that. If you're harming other people, there is a line that you cannot cross, and we believe that's a moment when governments can intervene. Our first speaker already told you about why there's a clear harm in this instance. Because the super rich politicians are funneling money into their campaigns, you actually put more burden for those candidates who are simply unfortunate enough to not be rich as those super rich politicians, Mr. Madam Speaker. You clearly have a harm in making an unfair playing ground for those other candidates. But number two, even if there are people who want the super rich, and therefore even though there are people who want the super rich, we believe that you're actually limiting the rights of the weaker politicians. Note how this also directly clashes with their argument about inclusivity. Because you have the super rich politicians because you have the super rich candidates that are running in these elections, you limit the capacity of weaker politicians, the poorer politicians, to compete. Therefore, you're actually harming inclusivity because you limit those people from running in presidential campaigns as well. So, Mr. Madam Speaker, say that you're a blooming democratic blooming candidate within the Democratic Party. How are you going to win Bloomberg, who literally funnels millions and billions of dollars into his own presidential campaign? Rina just simply nips the bud of those flourishing politicians because before the politicians grow and represent the people that they want the most. But note how because of this, you actually limit the people. You actually limit the representation of the people who want to vote for those poor politicians. Because those poor politicians cannot come into the political sphere, you actually limit the rights of people. You actually limit the rights of people who want to vote for those people, for those poor candidates as well. So you're actually harming inclusivity on your side. Well, another thing that side opposition finds fault with is about the issues of how the 101st person can also get into power and how that's much more detrimental. Two reasons why this is simply false. Number one, we believe that this is simply an infinite regression argument and therefore is a logical fallacy. Why? If there's so much concern about having a vague line, why do you have a legal voting age or a legal drinking age of 19 years old in the first place? What about the people who are 18 years old and 364 days old? What about the people who are 18 years old and 363 days old, right? Mr. Miles Speaker, we believe that there is a certain line and a best fit and a line of best fit within our society. There is a general trend. Because I think that people who are over a certain level of wealth tend to put themselves into the political sphere, tend to want to make their way into the political sphere. That is the reason why we have a general trend of those people doing so, and therefore we need to limit them based on that general trend. But number two, if the 101st richest guy in Earth is causing so much of a problem, we're also more than happy to limit that person's right to run in elections as well. We don't think that is impossible on our side. So second, let's talk about who better maximizes utility. The logic that we gave you was very, very clear. When these super rich individuals, a major characteristic of these super rich individuals is the fact that they are very good at running corporations. That's probably the reason why they are super rich in the first place. But the problem is, when they begin to run in presidential elections or such campaigns, that requires lots of effort, that requires billions and millions and billions of dollars being funneled into your political organization, that requires you to invest lots of time. Therefore, the capacity for those people to do what they're actually best at actually decreases under the world of side opposition. Because now those super rich people can need to focus and their attentions are diverted in running those presidential elections. This is we told you about why this is extremely detrimental to society. This decreases tax money. This is mainly harmful for corporations, and therefore this decreases tax money that governments can gather. Why is that so much detrimental? Because when you have less tax money, you have less social reforms, you have less social safety nets, you have less social redistribution of wealth and whatnot. Note how this also directly links with the second metric that you gave you in this debate about the equality in terms of wealth distribution. When the moment in which you have a more unequal society, we believe is the moment when we win this debate. For all these reasons, we're proud to propose.